Good morning. Today I want to talk about the line of actual control dynamics, the military line between India and China. There are two reasons for doing this. The first reason is that according to the recently held China Connect, where President Xi came and had the informal summit with Prime Minister Modi, the one single thing that came out was the need for mutual trust. Now, as part of this mutual trust, both sides have agreed to raise the level of trade interaction. This is certainly a good thing. In fact, better still would be if India can see the possibility of cooperation with China in some way on its One Belt, One Road. Having said that, will this build mutual trust? I am doubtful. Mutual trust is something entirely different. Now, what India has in mind, the government has in mind, is that to build mutual trust, let's get the external factors. Now, here I must caution that just as China's rise has happened, China is a major power today. China will not be contained. So any attempt to contain China will not work. So the only way for building mutual trust will be to understand the dynamics of the military line, the dynamics of what is the biggest issue today which is coming in the way of mutual trust, and that is the disputed border. Why this is important is that we need to understand that what is today India's vulnerability, if this can become a mutual vulnerability, if we can balance it off, which is what exactly understanding the LAC dynamics is all about. Once it is balanced off, the two sides feel a bit vulnerable about it, it will not remain any longer a point where we will feel, India will feel constrained. And I think that will be the point where we can work with China, and we must work with China for mutual trust. The other reason why I want to talk about the LAC dynamics is, as the word dynamics itself says, it's a dynamic thing. Any military line is not static. Its configuration, what's happening there, keeps changing. So the dynamics of the LC also impact on the dynamics of the line of control with Pakistan. I mean, this is a subject I'll take on subsequently, one of my videos, in one of my talks, as to how LAC dynamics is impacting on the LC dynamics. In other words, if we can bring some sort of a balance on the line of actual control, then we can also understand and bring a better balance, a better understanding of our military line with Pakistan. But this is, of course, for a subsequent talk. Having underscored the need to understand LAC, we have to first understand what is this border. Now, the border between India and China is not agreed on map. It is not demarcated or marked on the ground. Having said that, it goes along a watershed. It is a watershed, it's a mountainous area, which basically means that in a watershed, it is generally very easy to identify where this line should be going, and both sides know it. So what we have is, there is a border that India says this is its border, and then it's China which says, all right, this is our border. But both sides generally know where the border runs, and this is precisely the reason in 1986-87, when the Somdrongchu crisis happened, India felt that the Chinese side had trespassed the border, come on their side, and this was seen as an act of aggression, and hence there was a military build-up by both sides. So this only happened because even though it was not an agreed border, it was an understood border, it was a peaceful thing, that all right, it goes along the watershed. So the border understanding on both sides is something like this. China says that its border with India is a mere 2000 kilometers. Now this 2000 kilometers is the eastern sector, which is what is opposite our entire 90,000 square kilometers state of Arunachal Pradesh, which China says is South Tibet and belongs to it. So this 2000 is the entire eastern sector plus the middle sector. This is what they say is the dispute. But India on the other hand says no, the border is not 2000 kilometers, it is 3488 kilometers. Now what is this 1488 kilometers? This added distance that India talks about is really the distance from the tri-junction of Afghanistan, Pakistan, Pakistan occupied Kashmir, and right till the end of the eastern sector. This, as far as India is concerned, includes Pakistan occupied Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan. So this was our understanding of the border, and this is the understanding that remains today. Now the big problem came about in 1993 when India agreed on the Chinese suggestion to sign the Treaty of Peace and Tranquility. Now this has been exactly the millstone around India's neck. Why do I say that is because by definition we created the line of actual control, which is a military line. As I explained earlier that when there is a border, even though it is not agreed on the ground, it is understood. In the case of military line, the meaning itself says that it can be moved by force tactically by either side which has the capability to do that. And this has precisely been our problem since 1993. In fact, recently when for the Chennai Connect, when President Xi was in Chennai, we had on one of the shows a senior diplomat Nalin Suri, who has been India's ambassador in Beijing also. He very categorically said that if there was a clarification on the LAC, on the line of actual control, then the standoffs would reduce. I mean, of course, this runs contrary to another diplomat, Shiv Shankar Menon, who has maintained that, look, this has brought peace on the line and no shot has been fired. I'll come to that a bit later. So there is an admission, even by a senior diplomat, that yes, LAC clarification should come, and this is precisely the reason why in 2014, when President Xi came for his maiden visit to India, Prime Minister Modi had thrice brought up the subject publicly about seeking a clarification of the LAC, which the Chinese side did not agree. They did not agree for the simple reason that this is a military line, so the transgressions can be done without getting into the 1986 sort of situation, the Somdrong-Chu situation. Because here you can move tactically, you can move the, some patrols can go this side, that side, that side, both ways is the position of the Indian government. Indian diplomats, Indian military officers have consistently maintained that the transgressions, the intrusions are two-sided, both sides do it, because the border is not well defined. Well, the question to ask them is, if you see on the ground, one finds that at those heights of 13,000 to 15,000 feet, it is only the Indian soldiers who are holding the line. The Chinese are nowhere to be seen on the other side. The Chinese actually are way behind, hundreds of kilometers. That is where they used to come. I'm talking of pre-Doklam. Post-Doklam is something different. I'll come to that later. So, what the Chinese used to do is their patrols used to come in vehicles, come there and come to the border once in a while. They never held the line. The very fact that the Chinese, the PLA, did not think worth its while to hold the LAC like the Indian side was doing is because they never felt that the Indian side would transgress it. It's simple as that. If they felt that the Indian side would have the gumption to intrude and transgress, why would they not have their soldiers also sitting there like we've got all our soldiers along the line of actual control? I mean, it's very simple. So this is, you see, when I'm talking of LAC dynamics, the point I'm making is to get the correct picture first, to get the falsehood out of the way. It is absolutely critical so that we get the right answer, to create a mutual vulnerability for balance and for building mutual trust. So this is a falsehood that both sides do it. No, it's only one-sided, only the Chinese do it. Now, the second thing that everybody consistently maintains is that, look, it's a very peaceful border where no shot has been fired since 1967 when we had the Nathula instance. Now, it stands to reason that we have paid a very heavy price for that. And what is that heavy price? The heavy price is that after 1993, before 1993, it was not there when the LAC had not come into being. There was no need for our boys to hold these heights. But we paid a price. Our boys are sitting there facing a non-existent enemy under tremendous inclement weather and so much of hardship when we do not have even our roads and tracks going there. Boys have to lug up their logistics, walk for about 7 days, 10 days. Think about this psychological state of these soldiers. I mean, what price are you talking about? I mean, this itself is a very big price to pay. The amount of psychological pressure, how can you, at least there, the dynamics on the line of actual control with Pakistan is that at least the went up feelings, the emotions, they can release it. Both sides fire. Ask a soldier, he'll tell you it is better that I be on the LC than I be on the LAC. Twiddling my thumbs, not knowing what to do against an enemy who doesn't come, and when he comes just sort of looks for a gap and just comes in. So we have to put this in a correct perspective, as I said, to understand where we are headed. Now the next thing is, so we come to now what happened after Doklam. After Doklam, as we know, the Chinese have increased their capabilities substantially in the Tibet Autonomous Region. When I say substantially, I am talking of numbers like 200,000. And what am I talking about? I am talking of major reforms that they started in 2015. And as part of that reform, they have created against us, against India, there is a very specialized organization called the Tibet Military Command. This is specialized, which is only meant for this theatre, for Tibet, which works, of course, under the Western Theatre Command based in Chengdu. Now, the peculiarity of this command is, the Tibet Military Command, that it has a lot of non-kinetic capabilities. For example, what they have is, they have something called the Strategic Support Force. Now, under Strategic Support Force, the PLA has brought the humongous cyber capabilities, the excellent and very offensive electronic warfare capabilities, and of course their psychological operations. They've been clubbed together and brought there. Then they have another which is a capability which is for standoff capability, which comes from their again newly created rocket force. Now, as part of this rocket force, the PLA has brought in the huge capability of cruise missiles. Absolutely accurate cruise missiles have been brought in. Then they have a huge capability today of unmanned combat drones. They have so much of this capability. I mean, in fact, it is said that today China is number one in the world insofar as the cruise missiles are concerned. They have so many of them of different variety. All this is there. So what I am trying to put across is, when they got in all this capability, this happened starting from the winter of 2017 to 2018. They started the build up, and all this build up happened in 2018. They did a lot of exercises in the Tibet Autonomous Region, and if anybody has closely monitored their exercises, it would be realized that they have to do with two key things. It has to do with the strategic support force. Now this strategic support force, which I said electronic warfare and I said cyber warfare, these capabilities can act independently, and they can also support the forces in being, the forces which will be there for maneuver. So they did those exercises. So the point here is that they have a huge capability today, which they are exercising regularly in terms of non-kinetic. I'll just explain a bit on this non-kinetic thing. You know, when I say cyber, what am I talking about? I am talking about today a capability that the Chinese have, which is not confined to a war zone. It is a capability which can engulf the adversary's whole of nation. It can be used against our power stations, our grids, various grids, our telecommunication grids. So this is what we are talking about. It's an entirely different ball game. So instead of understanding that from the earlier threat which we faced before Doklam, and the earlier threat was the threat of their excellent border management. When I say excellent border management, what I meant was, our boys are holding the line. They don't bother, because they know that, look, we have mobile forces, we can get very fast, we have excellent roads, so no problems at all, and we know the vulnerabilities of what all vulnerability exists on the line of actual control. And on our side, we had the problem, everybody knows, no secret, of frugal, if not defunct, infrastructure, road tracks. There is a big problem. This side, there is a big problem about our operational logistics, which most of them are cantonments. Everything is south of the Brahmaputra river. Everybody knows this. So now what has happened is that from the threat of border management, it has gone up substantially to the threat of forces in being. I mean, the forces are there. It is a threat which is a non-kinetic threat. It is a threat which is a standoff threat. This threat has increased. And what do? See, I am not being critical of the Indian Army, or perhaps I am, because we need to understand that this whole plan, which is unfolding now, we had this exercise in September in Ladakh, the integrated battle groups, which is said to be the brainchild of the present Army Chief General Bipin Rawat. And then we rather have this exercise still going on called Him Vijay. It's again an exercise where the integrated battle groups are being tested, and perhaps in the next 2-3 years, or maybe 2 years, once they are tested, they are validated, they are accepted, then we will start having this. The point here is that this does not cater for the forces in being threat. This caters for the earlier threat of border management. Let me explain. In the earlier threat of border management, what the Chinese could do, and they did, was create disputed areas. I mean, so many disputed areas have been created since 1993, which is where the standoffs happen. They could just come in. So the whole idea was, at that time, instead of holding the entire line of actual control, if we had used technology, what is being done now, and we would have had some sort of forces which could come to the standoff point. Basically not to fight. The idea is not to fight. The idea is to show the strength there, that yes, we are there. So what is being done by the army, and mind you, this is a single service. All the exercises which are happening there on the Tibet Autonomous Region are multi-domain exercises. There is a big difference in the two. The threat is very different. So what we are doing now, single service exercise, basically catering for how fast we can get our soldiers, through by Air Force providing the strategic lift and operational lift, and we can get to the standoff site. I mean, this is an idea which honestly is 15 years old in the Indian Army only. I mean, I know of senior generals who've been telling me this, and rightly so, that look, this should have been done long back. But the point is that this has to be questioned. Why it has to be questioned is that what you are doing today does not cater for the present threat. Therefore, the vulnerability still remains. It is not that China will go to war. No, China will not go to war. But China will exercise military coercion. It will exercise diplomatic coercion for the simple reason that PLA is an intrinsic part of Chinese foreign policy, period. The PLA reports to the party, period. So the thing is that, as I said in the beginning, if we will not get the border dynamics correct, which basically means create mutual vulnerability, there is no way we will be able to build trust and seek cooperation which is due, which needs to be done with China. We need to be part in some way of the One Belt, One Road. But before that, since border is not getting resolved in a hurry, it is very obvious. So therefore, and the LAC will not be clarified again at all. So perhaps the LAC could be clarified at a later date when the Chinese realize that, all right, these guys have understood the dynamics, the military dynamics on the line of actual control. They have managed to create a mutual vulnerability. That is the time they may decide to give a concession to us and say, all right, now we do this LAC clarification. I mean, that helps us. Absolutely correct. So the point I am making is, this is wrong. This integrated, this IBGs which has been created, integrated battle groups, it's not helping at all. I mean, it's optics. It is not a military thinking at all, because in this the real threat has not been assessed. So I think this is where the focus has to go in. A, please try and assess the threat correct. So create a mutual vulnerability so that mutual trust can be built between India and China, and two big countries with two very big markets can work together for the Asian good. Thank you.